to the stage Reid Mihalko.
Honey, could you hear that? Just barely. This'll be my office then. Not every new homeowner picks their office by walking around with their partner, making orgasm sounds to see which room cannot be heard from the master bedroom. Allison Moon, for those of you who have heard of Girl Sex 101, which is the book that she authored and has won awards, is my primary partner. We've been together for 10 years in a slutty, polyamorous, queer relationship. First time we ever had sex was in a Fivesome at Burning Man. Perhaps that's your story too. And we would move to Oakland. Her from LA, me from Manhattan in New York City. We're like, let's go live together. Excellent. Where should we live? Well, she was like, someplace very, very queer. And I'm like, that sounds great. And we picked on the East Bay. And we eventually found a place in Oakland. And we called it Fruitopia. And it was a big loft. For those of you old enough to remember Flashdance, the movie, it was like that big loft. And with the exception of just a lot of soldering, a lot of hot soldering of metal with helmets on, we had this great loft with this amazing bathtub and all this like beautiful light. And it was like, this will be our Shangri-La. We will throw orgies here. We will run workshops here. It had a stage. And I walked in, I'm like, how the fuck? How the fuck do you find a loft, a Flashdance-like loft? Me, the person who came of age in the 80s. I'm like, how? How is this possible? We have a stage. I can teach workshops here. We can have orgies, and there's a stage for the orgies. And Allison, she's like, this will be good for us. And I'm like, yes, this will be good for us. And many orgies were thrown. And in Oakland lore, Fruitopia is legendary. It was a place where a lot of queers lived. We named it Fruitopia because it was next to the Fruitvale BART stop, so it was easy to remember which stop to get off of. And our superintendent, the person who ran the building, kind of took a liking to us really quickly, and we wanted to build walls and things like that so that we could afford the rent to have roommates there, and he's like, just build whatever you want. Because once he found out that we were sex educators, and he's like, build whatever you want. We didn't really realize why he was so excited, but after he came to the first workshop, which was called Iron Slut, Sex Educators Showdown, and he's sitting there with his partner, and I'm about to do a live hand-fucking demonstration on Allison, and Allison's kind of like looking at me, and there's our superintendent, and she's kind of like whispers to me, she's like, I don't know that I'm really cool with the man who has keys to our apartment watching me get hand-fucked right now. And I'm like, it's gonna be okay, because you're gonna peg me later. And she's like, how does that make it different? And a half an hour later, I'm on my hands and knees facing our superintendent, and Allie's like lubing up the cock. And we're walking, talking, and teaching through it, and all of a sudden I'm like, I'm about to be entered! And I make eye contact with our superintendent. And while Allison's talking about, how to get a huge dildo into somebody's ass, I look at him and I'm like, I mouth silently, are you okay? And almost like a spy, he goes, as Allison's entering me, and I'm like, I have found my home. And we threw many workshops there. We threw many gatherings of sex geeks and sex educators and sex-positive folk. We threw many, many, many orgies. And then one day, Allison sat me down and she's like, I think I need to leave Oakland. And I'm like, what? But honey, this is this is our place. She's like, it's time for me to leave. I'm like, why? And she's like, it's really noisy in this huge loft, which is basically made completely out of wood. It was like an old mechanical, building where they built like ammunition boxes back whenever. But it was all built out of wood, so it was kind of like living in a piano soundboard. So wherever there was sound, it just got amplified, and it was arched, vaulted ceilings. It was really beautiful. And Allison's like, it's really noisy here. I need something more peaceful, more quiet. And I'm like, but it's always quiet. Like, you sleep in every morning. And for Allison, morning is like 11. And for me, morning is like 7:30, 8:30, maybe 9. And I really like morning sex. Really, really like morning sex. And when we decided to move in together, we had this really serious conversation. I'm like, okay, so we're gonna live together, we're gonna be adults, we're gonna have these like big adult conversations. I'm like, what is sacred to you? And she's like, sleep. I'm like, good, got it. She's like, what's sacred to you? I'm like, fucking. She's like, good, got it. And I'm like, how do we make this work? Because as we started like living together, it was obvious that like me having morning sex, being a queer polyamorous slut with a lot of friends and a lot of lovers, like morning sex inside a piano soundboard was impossible. And for me, I'm, as a relationship geek, I don't really talk about or think about like compromise. Everyone do air quotes? Now do dirty air quotes. Like, there's no compromise in healthy relationships. There's this idea of what's sacred. And kind of, if you've ever read Rilke and Letters to a Young Poet, it's like this idea of like, I want to be the guardian of your solitude. And for me, the solitude means what's sacred to you. And for Allison, it was like sleep. And I was like, okay, great. I'll forego morning sex so that you can sleep in. But the minute you're up, it is on. And that seemed okay because I traveled a lot for sex education and for work and things like that. And I was like, okay, like I'll go have my 8 a.m. morning sex or my 3 a.m. in the morning kind of blowjob sex or whatever that is, like middle of the night sex. Because Alice and I are both like notoriously good at just sleeping through the entire night. So it's like, good night, good night. And people are like, don't you like wake up and have like, sex in the middle of the night? And I'm like, we've been together 10 years. That has happened once. Why? Don't you love each other? Don't you find each other hot? Yes. But you know what we find more hot? Sleep. And so we just sleep through the night. And so all of a sudden we're like living there and it's like, I would forego this morning sex. She would wake up and then I would bang my friend who slept over the night before. Or we try to have like ninja morning sex, which never goes well. Just don't do that. But it never really bothered me because I was the guardian of Allison's solitude, her sleep. And she would never get shamed by me for sleeping in ever. And she, in return, never shamed me for being slutty in the ways that I was slutty. And it worked out really well. But then all of a sudden she's like, we need to leave Oakland. I'm like, why? She's like, because it's too noisy. I'm like, but I don't have morning sex. You sleep in all the time. I don't want to leave Oakland. She's like, I need to leave. Will you come with me? Now, something that you don't know about me is that my mom and dad loved each other very, very much. They shared that special hug 4 times. Me and my 3 brothers grew up watching people who would catch making out in the kitchen, making out in the living room, cuddling on the couch, slowly, with their inabilities to be able to communicate their wants, needs, and desires, tear each other apart. My father would start to lose the family business, not tell anybody. He'd lied a lot because he wanted to save face. My mom couldn't cope with all the miscommunication. She became an alcoholic. And then one day, my brother called me up and he goes, Mom and Dad lost the house. I'm like, what do you mean? And they're like, I just read it in the paper. It's up for auction on Saturday. And I'm like, I bet you Mom doesn't know. At that time, my brother and me were both really pissed at my dad for a bunch of lying stuff. And I'm like, who gets to tell Mom? And he's like, I do, I found out. I'm like, okay. And sure enough, my dad had lost a house. It was up for auction. So I grew up in a family where things got really fucked up, and then my mom and dad lost a house, and then they lived in their van for a couple of years. And all of a sudden, Allison's like, I need to leave Oakland. I think we should buy a house. And I'm So what would that need to look like? And we almost both said simultaneously, we need a house where you can fuck your brains out and it won't bother me. And I'm like, yes! Now I'm on board. Flash forward to, we throw into the Bat computer a bunch of what we need for our businesses as sex educators and writers and things like that, and out spits Portland. Welcome to lovely Portland. We have one of the greatest airports in the world, voted #1 airport in the world forever. We have trees and peace and quiet. And Allison sets out to start finding houses. Her main goal, we need a house we can have orgies in, and Reid can have morning sex in, and I can sleep undisturbed. And we find a house. And it's time for the inspection. The offer gets received. I'm waiting for all my mom and dad craziness to come up. Like all the I'm gonna lose the house, because now that I have a house, we could lose a house. And I'm just waiting. We're doing the inspection. Allison and I are walking into rooms, and we would intentionally walk into rooms before the other one, being like, wow, this is a lovely room, honey. Could you hear me? And the whole time, the real estate agents coming along with us and being like, you two are kind of weird. But they were recommended to us from a kinky real estate agent, and so we're like, do you know what we do? And she's like, I've Googled you. And with those words, I'm like, we're looking for a house I can have orgies in that won't bother the neighbors and where Allison can sleep. And she's like, too much information. But I get what you mean. And so now the offer gets accepted. Allison and I are unloading the moving truck, and now the neighbors come over. And all I can think of is meet the sex geeks. And as they're talking to us, Allison and I are just loading things in, and they're so eventually it's so what do you two do? And they seem like nice people. They all have kids. In my head, I'm like, oh, this won't end well. But I'm like, well, Allison and I both do lecturing at colleges, sexual assault prevention, things like that. If you ever have any questions or situations from your kids that feel too weird, send them to us. Allison and I are this is stuff that we specialize in. And the whole time I'm like, please let that just kind of anchor that they are the safe ones. And we waved goodbye. They delivered the cookies that they baked. And I'm like, oh, they're so nice. We go inside, we close the door, and then now it's time to actually test it. We own the house now, but now it's time to actually test it out. And we're going from room to room. Allison's in the master bedroom, and I'm like, huh? Do it with me a little bit. Honey, can you hear me? She's like, yep, that was really loud. I'm like, fuck. Because that was the big room that could have been my office. Fuck. Because obviously where my office is, because I do morning interviews and things like that, I need to have that be a place that has some soundproofing, but then that's also where the guest bed will go. And I go into the next room, and I go, how was that? She's like, that's great. I can hardly hear you. I'm like, really? Oh my goodness, this will be my office. And she comes running in, all aglow. She's like, I did a good job. I found a good house for us. I'm like, you found a really good house for us. And then that's when I really got, duh, I've been with this person for 10 years, and, we've had a lot of sex. She's watched me have a lot of sex. I've been with new lovers in our bed back in Oakland, and she's like, I just need to come in and get something. She runs in, and my new lover's like, what's going on? And Allison's like, hi. I just need to get this. Do you guys need anything? Lube or water or anything like that? And new lover's like, no. And then Allison leaves, and we're fucking again, and the lover's like, is that how it's always? Is that normal? And I'm like, yeah, that's totally normal. That's Allison, my lovely partner. And as we're sitting in what will now be my office, And I'm really getting emotional because, you know, Allison sees my emotion and she's like, is this your mom and dad stuff? Like, are you afraid? Like, what's going on? And I'm like, I just know that you love me. Because I don't think when people buy houses, they go around making orgasm noises to figure out which room's gonna be their office. And so, whatever relationships that you practice, my bit of advice to end with is, look for not what you can compromise on, but what you're willing to hold sacred for your partner and defend. And be the guardian of that solitude. Thank you.